Okay, well, good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, good morning, depending where you're tuning in from. Welcome to the Modern Chinese Humanities Seminar. My name is Li Jie, and I teach Chinese film and media studies at Harvard. I'm co-organizing this lecture series together with my colleague David Wang to feature a new scholarship in modern Chinese literary, media, and cultural studies. We're very grateful for the sponsorship and logistical support of the Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies, with special thanks to Mark Grady for setting everything up. And before introducing our speaker today, I just wanted to mention two further upcoming talks on Zoom this fall semester. In 3 weeks, exactly at the same time, on Thursday, October 28th, 8 p.m., Professor Shaoling Ma from Yale and US will be speaking about her new book, The Stone and the Wireless, Mediating China, 1861 to 1906. And then on Friday, November 12th at noon, Professor Michelle Hawkes from the University of Notre Dame will be giving a talk on the shifting limits of reform, literature, and censorship in China since 1979. Today, we're really delighted to welcome Professor Laikwan, whose work has really been a source of inspiration for myself and many of our students. Professor Pang is a professor of cultural studies and head of the Department of Cultural and Religious Studies at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. She is this year a fellow in residence at the Center for Advanced Studies in the Behavior Sciences at Stanford University. So she's on research sabbatical this year, but has very kindly agreed to come and speak to us. And Laikwan is an amazingly prolific scholar. Whose 6 single-authored monographs actually span a remarkable range of issues and time periods, from the Chinese left-wing cinema movement of the 1930s to copyright and piracy in China's creative industries. And my graduate students, and we just read your Distorting Mirror, Visual Modernity in China at the Turn of the 20th Century. And also this book is also quite essential reading, The Art of Cloning, Creative Production During the Cultural Revolution. I've taken this book with me across continents several times. So her most recent book is The Appearing Demos, Hong Kong During the Umbrella Movement, which was published last year in 2020. And in fact, Professor Pang was originally scheduled to come to Harvard in March 2020, and we had to, for a workshop on Asian media studies that we unfortunately had to cancel because of the pandemic. We had been hoping to bring her back to campus, but unfortunately, this is not yet possible. The paper that she was originally going to present last year was called Mask as Identity. So it's a very timely topic, the political subject in 2019 Hong Kong social unrest. So if you're interested in that, please also check that out. It's been published in the journal Cultural Studies earlier this year. And now she has already moved on to a new book project about the intellectual and cultural history of state sovereignty in modern China. And her talk today is called Economic Sovereignty in Contemporary China, the Biopolitical Subject as Garlic Chive. Please join me in virtually welcoming Professor Pang Laikwan.
Thank you very much.
Over to you.
Thank you very much to Jie and David for bringing me here. I'm very honored to be a part of this. So today I'm going to talk about a paper is already just published, but it's actually also a part of my ongoing project, as Jie just mentioned, that this is because I'm interested in tracing the development of the concept of sovereignty, particularly in terms of the state-people relationship from late Qing to the current time, spanning the imperial period, the Republican, socialist, and the post-socialist period, how a concept or a structure get altered and also continuously aggrandized during this very turbulent 20th century. But this paper situates at the end of this historical spectrum, while I actually now working more on the historical dimension of it. In here, I particularly choose the concept of economic sovereignty to sort of try to understand the relationship between the state and the people during this period. So here we go, I'm going to start. Okay. Sorry. In the 3 lectures he delivered in Paris in the mid-70s, Foucault offers a thorough analysis of the development of modern governmentality of Western liberal countries, which he terms biopolitics. Foucault first demonstrates that the biological states not only manage life, but manage to make it proliferate, giving the subjects an impression that the state serves their natural desires to prosper. That's the first book, the first lecture, Society Must Be Defended. In his subsequent set of lectures, now titled Security, Territory, and Population as the book title, he provides an overview of the new technology of power over population developed in Europe, connecting this new governmentality to the rise of the modern nation states. In the final lecture of this famous trilogy, Foucault deals with the biopolitics from an economic perspective, tracing how an economic rationality emphasizing freedom and competition developed into an economic juridical ensemble in the 20th century. Although Foucault himself does not offer an overall analysis connecting the 3 sets of lectures, he provides a macro scanning of contemporary governmentality in which the biological, the economic, and the political are deeply intertwined. In this lecture, I want to investigate precisely the relationship between the biological, the economic, and the political in contemporary Chinese governmentality. Foucault's analysis of neoliberalism is based largely on an easy marriage between the biological and the economic, in which they are both caught in a blind drive for development. In this lecture, I want to explore following this, thinking, but I also want to challenge it a little bit by exploring if there is a political consciousness of the biological subject. I also want to bring back the specificity of the different states into the discussions of governmentality. Because we do know that in general Marxist analysis, the state is often understood as the political organization of the bourgeoisie to serve their economic interest. There's also a similar assumption in Foucault's analysis that the dominant political system dovetails with the dominant economic structure. So instead of assuming the economic as the base upon which all is built, I would like to point out an opposite tendency in post-socialist China. That is to say, capitalism is only a means for the empowerment of the state. We must remind ourselves that governmentality is ultimately state-specific, so that neoliberalism could not be a consistent practice globally. A more complex framework must be developed for the contemporary PRC, and that would help us gain better insights about the increasing intertwining relations among the political, the economic, and the biological developed in the world. Today, I would like to focus on a meme that has spread rapidly among Chinese internet users in the last few years. That is garlic chives, or in Chinese, is jiucai. This metaphor is used in contemporary China to refer to those ordinary Chinese people who are constantly lured to participate in all kinds of economic activities. But their investments are destined to be consumed by the establishment. Corresponding with this garlic chives is the sickle, the mianbao, which is used to describe the economic and political forces feeding upon the fortunes lauded by the individual investors. But before I go on to the cultural representations of the jiucai, I would like to first engage with the political economy here. Economics sovereignty is not a widely circulating concept. When it is used, it usually refers to the state's right to regulate economic activities within the state borders. However, since it concerns with the exchange and circulation, economics tend to bypass national boundaries, and such transnational movements are further reinforced in the age of globalization. But the PRC also gradually developed a specific affinity with the term economic sovereignty, emphasizing the need to control the foreign trade and prevent global finance from influencing or controlling China. The PRC has been very vocal, in fact, about its success in protecting its economic autonomy. It proclaims that the country was able to sail through the 2008 global financial crisis because of its strong economic sovereignty. And the term became popular again in the 2019 Sino-US trade war, in which the PRC accused the United States of invading China's economic sovereignty by demanding a structural change to its economic structure. Critics have praised the Chinese government's pragmatic approach to economic activities, providing both private enterprises and state enterprises with room to prosper. But other critics also observe that China's recent economic growth has been based largely on the local competitions among towns, cities, and actually individuals. Domestic cutthroat competition is extremely common in China. Such reckless internal competition is becoming more intense as China enters its so-called Great Domestic Circulation period, reflected in the sudden popularity of the term 内卷化 in China's internet world since the second half of the 2020, just a year ago. So what does this term mean? We have to go back to 1963. Clifford Gertz, in his book Agricultural Involution, studies the centuries of rice or wet rice cultivation practices in Indonesia, and finds that the repeated and labor-intensive practices did not bring significant technological or political change, but rather to put the people under more intense labor competition without improving their skills or methods. American scholar Philip Wang first used Gertz's idea of involution to describe Chinese rural development in the Yangtze Delta in the Ming-Qing period, which was also characterized by ever increasing labor input with diminishing marginal returns. In the Chinese translation of the book, the neologism 内卷化 is used to translate Gertz's idea of involution. While the term has been used in China for 3 decades, it suddenly became a buzzword on the Chinese internet in 2020, when globalization slowed down substantially due to the coronavirus pandemic and the Sino-US decoupling. The term is now widely used to describe the ferocious rivalry and competition Chinese citizens needed to face, to the extent that where even toddlers in kindergarten are already exposed to a rhetoric of comparison and competition. I'm giving you an example here. This is an advertisement for a Chinese pram school. It goes, we nurture your kid if you come. We will nurture the competitors of your kid if you don't come. So this vividly demonstrate the kind of internal competitions that China and ordinary Chinese citizens are facing today. So I'll now come back to the garlic chives that you had. Garlic chives is an extremely adaptive plant and is capable of enduring both cold and hot weather. It is widely cultivated in different parts of China. It is basically perennial, so that once the seeds are planted, they will regrow every year. It is also very easy to manage, to the extent that farmers just need to cut the plants with a sickle or a sharp mussel shell in some places when they are tall enough, and the remaining parts will grow up again. Ecologically, it is described as a kind of noxious weed, highly aggressive and spreading rapidly, often invading other existing plants and creating a monoculture. While garlic chives have been associated with grassroots load and productivity in Chinese culture, Jiucai first became a trending term on China's internet around 2020, describing those investors or traders who lost money in the rapidly expanding stock market, and they were called Jiucai. In 2011, a woman who calls herself Ocean Star Sand lamented on the internet how she had lost money rapidly on the stock market, and she pleaded for help from fellow netizens for investment strategies. Her appeal received a wide response, with both reproaches and sincere assistance, giving her a short fame as Jiucai Girl. The term then became a buzzword and went viral, widely used to refer to all those individuals who keep losing money in the investment but never learned their lessons, and who maintain a blind faith in their luck or whatever inside tips they receive to beat the market. And there's also a best-selling book titled The Self-Cultivation of Garlic Chives, 韭菜的自我修养, which was published to provide psychological and strategic tips for succeeding on the stock market. This title shows how the garlic chives is a metaphor of subject formation in contemporary China, used by the Chinese people themselves to mock their voluntary participation in the jungle of greed and brutality. Here I'm going to show you some clips explaining what the Jiucai has become an internet meme. Let me see if I can share screen here. Okay, where am I now? Sorry. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have done. Sorry. I think I'm sorry.
Is it the YouTube on the? I see the YouTube link, but I
sure. Because my here you go.
Okay.
Sorry.
Did you share sound?
Can you hear me?
No, when you did screen share, did you press the share sound? There's a button for sharing sound. We can't hear anything.
You can't hear anything. Okay.
No.
All right. So I need to go back to
when you go to share screen, there should be a button for like at the lower left corner that says share sound.
Okay, I got it. All right. I just want to use this example to show you that the Juchai has quickly entered popular culture with people making up songs and DIY MVs to be uploaded to Douyin. Those of you who are familiar with Douyin know that they are the Chinese version of the original Chinese version of TikTok and other Chinese online platforms. There was considerable interest in this 韭菜歌, which was adapted from a 2002 pop song titled Anna's Charm. Because there is a line repeating the word here, 就在, netizens turned it into a cover song by changing 就在 to 韭菜. Those who were here are 韭菜. And then I'm going to show you okay, I'll see if I can do this. All right. Can you see this? Can you see? You can. Okay. Let me show you another clip, which is actually is a recent upload in Bilibili, the B10 in China. It shows an ordinary video teaching people how to grow jiucai. Received millions of views. You can see that there were actually more than 1 million viewers because they are very entertained by this original video, which was simply trying to teach people how to grow the jiucai. Then we know that Bilibili is it's an upload. It's a video sharing platform where members can actually put in their comments directly on the video. So we can take a quick look at how this looks like.
现在的朋友几乎没有不种韭菜的，韭菜是多年生的，种一次吃好几年，而且还可以多次多茬采收。韭菜割茬采收也是有讲究的，如果方法得当，割茬一茬比一茬壮；而如果方法不当呢，韭菜发黄，而且还长得特别的瘦小。那么割茬韭菜究竟有哪些管理方法呢？今天就给大家分享一下。
Okay, I'm going to just stop here, but you see the point. This woman who just simply wants to teach how people grow jiucai, but then the netizens would pick this up and then put on their comments, and the comments actually reveal how the jiucai has actually been a very popular metaphor for the kind of sufferings people have been going through, and in particular the kind of class struggles that is implied in the comments. We can actually see a lot of such connotations and being reviewed, such as, for example, the capitalist talking about this as a reflection of the capitalist ways of treating the ordinary people. So I'm going to stop right now. Go back to So I'll now move back to the political economy a little bit. In 2002, the street represents theory credited to Jiang Zemin was ratified by the CCP to allow capitalists to join the party. This theory also marks the official incorporation of the privately owned enterprises, POEs, to become a legitimate part of the socialist economy. In 2017, the Xi Jinping government began to strengthen SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, by issuing a series of supporting policies and promoting mergers and acquisitions. The state's increasing demand for compliance has become even more obvious since the advent of the COVID-19 and the escalation of the Sino-US tensions, with Xi making it clear that patriotism is the foremost criterion for Chinese enterprises in such times. Critics began to describe the state's harvesting of the POEs in the manner of garlic chives being cut down by the sickles, with the private capitalist having to sacrifice themselves in the face of state demands. So major entrepreneurs as powerful as Jack Ma and Ren Jianfei are all now subject to the state's taxing control. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is before we would consider, the netizens would consider the sickle as the capitalist, but now there seems to be a shift where the capitalists themselves are also becoming 韭菜. Now, I would like to show you a couple more YouTube clips. Before I show you that, I will briefly explain what I'm showing you. The metaphor 韭菜 went viral again immediately after the Youth Day, May 4th in 2020, when the popular online video sharing platform Bilibili published a short video to the young generation 之后浪, sensationally narrated by the famous 50-year-old actor He Bing. In the video, He represents the older generation to celebrate the quality, achievement, and global perspectives of the new generation. It attracted waves of compliments and criticism, including many derivative and ironic videos, self-produced by the younger generations themselves. Needless to say, many of them quickly disappear under China's censorships. These videos demonstrate the frustrations of younger people who are all too aware of their precarity. They are overworked, underpaid, and sent to Africa for the Belt and Road Initiative. There we also see 韭菜 widely used as the metaphor to represent the younger generation who are exploited and harvested by the establishment. And the second video I would like to show you is the video titled 之前浪 to the old generation, in where the young narrator mimicking the tone of He Bing announces, "You are very fortunate to meet garlic chives like us, but we garlic chives are very unfortunate to meet people like you." Now I try to share it.
那些口口声声一代不如一代的人，应该看着你们，像我一样。我看着你们，满怀羡慕。人类积攒了几千年的财富，所有的知识、见识、智慧和艺术，像是专门为你们准备的礼物。科技繁荣，文化繁茂，城市繁华。现代文明的成果被层层打开，可以尽情地享用。自由学习一门语言，学习一门手艺，欣赏一部电影，去遥远的地方旅行。很多人从小你们就在自由探索自己的兴趣，很多人在童年就进入了不惑之年，不惑于自己喜欢什么，不喜欢什么。人与人之间的壁垒被打破，你们只凭相同的爱好就能结交千万个值得干杯的朋友。你们拥有了我们曾经梦寐以求的权利，选择的权利。你所热爱的就是你的生活。你们有幸遇见这样的时代，但是时代更有幸遇见这样的你们。我看着你们，满怀敬意，向你们的专业态度致敬。你们正在把传统的变成现代的，把经典的变成流行的，把学术的变成大众的，把民族的变成世界的。你们把自己的热爱变成了一个和成千上万的人分享快乐的事业。向你们的自信致敬。弱小的人才习惯嘲讽与否定，内心强大的人从不吝啬赞美与鼓励。向你们的大气致敬。小人同而不和，君子美美与共，和而不通。 更年轻的身体容得下更多元的文化、审美和价值观。有天我终于发现，不只是我们在教你们如何生活，你们也在启发我们怎样去更好的生活。那些抱怨一代不如一代的人，应该看看你们，就像我一样，我看着你们满怀感激。因为你们，这个世界会更喜欢中国。因为一个国家最好看的风景，就是这个国家的年轻人。因为你们，这世上的小说、音乐、电影所表现的青春，就不再是忧伤、迷茫，而是善良、勇敢、无私、无所畏惧，是心里有火，眼里有光。不用活成我们想象中的样子。我们这一代人的想象力不足以想象你们的未来。如果你们依然需要我们的祝福，那么奔涌吧，后浪！我们在同一条奔涌的河流。太多了吧！和1.3亿 B 站年轻人一起表达自我。拥抱世界。
I'm sorry I have to suffer you with this. However, you like it, partly because I want to show you the derivative 之前浪 video. This video doesn't have subtitles, so you have to bear with me. I will have to speak on top of the existing soundtrack, so that those who do not understand Chinese can catch something. So, let's see.
那些口口声声一代
Those who say each generation is less than the last one must be you.
不如一代的人，应该正是你们。我看着你，满怀嫉妒。人类积攒了几千年的财富，所有的土地、房屋、权力和话术，像是为你们量身定做的礼物。科技繁荣，文化繁荣，城市繁荣，现代文明的成果被你们层层打开，独自享用。你们拥有了我们梦寐已久的权利，选择的权利。你所嘲笑的，正是我们的生活。你们有幸遇见这样的韭菜，但韭菜的不幸是遇见了这样的你们。我看着你们假装敬意，为了活下去而向你们屈膝。你们正在把现代的变成传统的，把流行的变成广场的，把学术的变成闹着玩的，把大楼变成锅里的。向你们的自信致敬。弱小的我们习惯了谄媚与殷勤，那些内心强大的人大多孤苦伶仃。向你们的大气致敬，小人天天996，君子天天66狗。更年迈的身体左右着我们的文化、审美、价值观。有一天，我们终会发现，不仅是你在教我们如何生活，也按时提醒着我们：嘿，小伙，该交房租了。那些强调一代不如一代的人，不要再强调了。拨开物质的外壳，也许你们也会退缩。你们看到几朵激荡的浪花，便试着为后浪吟唱。更多的后浪沉潜于海底，默默的、无助的徘徊着，拼搏着。我们虽长久的忧伤、迷茫，但我们依旧勇敢、善良。时间、历史、镜子会照耀着每一个人的模样。后浪当然值得被吟唱，但歌颂者不应是像镰刀似的前浪。奔涌吧，前浪，因为河流是你们的河流；奔涌吧，后浪，越过河流，因为河流的尽头是更广阔的海洋。
Okay, I know I'm pretty annoying for having two soundtrack being played together, but in any case, now go back to my PowerPoint. Okay. Right? Yes. So while globalization has been a major factor behind China's recent economic miracle, the sheer volume of the Chinese population is indeed the largest asset of the national economy. This explains Premier Li Keqiang first advocating the idea of mass entrepreneurships and innovation in 2014 and 2015. He advanced the slogan, entrepreneurship for the masses, innovations of the multitude, 大众创业，万众创新, to describe a new national economic engine. This campaign raised the tide of the new information and creative economy, through which the government could upgrade its economy from low-end commodity production to high-end innovation and technology. The promotion of mass entrepreneurship also ties into another popular governance discourse, financial inclusion, 普惠金融. This concept began to gain wide global attention in the early 2000s when the World Bank identified a direct correlation between poverty and financial exclusion, meaning that those people who do not have access to banking and financial services tend to be poor. Financial inclusion has then been widely promoted around the world, and it has become a popular ideology in recent international policy circles as an effective way to eradicate poverty and improve human development. Governments are advised to facilitate individuals and small businesses to be included in the formal financial system, to have access appropriate, affordable, and timely financial products and services. And it is believed that by encouraging the people to have access to financial means, they can become stakeholders in the national economy, promoting and sharing the benefits of overall development. Financial inclusion was quickly absorbed into the rhetoric of the PRC sovereignty. In 2015, the State Council issued the first national strategic plan to promote financial inclusion. And it was further popularized in China along with the e-commerce boom, with the consumer society so eager to buy and the microfinance system so established to loan. Individuals can become new capitalists very quickly. But since most of these new entrepreneurs either do not have a credit history or operate very small businesses, they turn to online banking. Online banks or P2P lending platforms for easily obtainable high-interest loans. Many of them are quickly caught up in the web of digital loans, loan sharks and system of social surveillance, preparing the ground for the P2P online lending bubbles. The PRC's elaborate social credit system further requires Chinese citizens to comply with social norms, as any deviation could result in deterioration of one's social credit, therefore downgrading one's position in society. In fact, China's national economic development has been driven largely by a process of resource capitalizations through loans and debt. So in that sense, the Jutai is a very amazing metaphor to describe the kind of political economy that is now circulating in China. The Jutai are indebted to their lenders, while the political regime also relies on the constant borrowing of the people to stabilize its economy. The fate of the people and the state become deeply intertwined under this mutual indebtedness. So in another word, every citizen became. I'm going to end this by giving you a short conclusion. Unfortunately, I am not able to show to give you much of insights about the future. This is way beyond my ability, but I can tell you some of my reflection about this. Other than Jutai and Nizhen, there's also a number of recently popular terms on the internet in China, describing those who have been so exhausted. I mean, the first one is Tangping, described those who have been so exhausted by the social involution to choose an incooperative and resigned attitude to face the immense pressure and toxic work culture. And the second one is Jiaxu. Along with this idea it has been used by some netizens, but mostly those who use Twitter via VPN or outside China to describe China's current political dire straits, whose rapid deterioration is reinforced by the state's authoritarian control. It suggests a passive revolution, observing the regime digging its own grave. The third term is Ruguan entering the past, which refers to the 17th century historical event of the Manchurian banner armies entering the Sanhai Pass, Ru Sanhaiguan, which facilitate the Qing army's final victory over the Ming armies to set up the Qing dynasty. This buzzword is very visible on the Chinese internet, used by many ordinary Chinese netizens who urge the nation to defeat the United States to become the final master of the world. So Ruguan represents the ability of the Chinese people to enter the world. So all these memes and code words are characteristic to an internet culture with so many people participating and with so much censorship. I do not doubt the Chinese people's capacity to survive the system with their own tactics and interests fulfilled. But I hope to see the Chinese netizens or citizens capable of seeing themselves as neither isolated entrepreneurs nor a unified people, but a plural existence of many individuals different from each other, upon which a political community can be built. As both Agamben and Esposito have reminded us, biopower establishes close connections between life and death, so that biopolitics easily becomes thanatopolitics, shown most tragically in Nazism, which guarantees that a race will live by advancing the death of another race. Obviously, I'm not suggesting any connections between, Chinese and the German situations in the Second World War. But I would just want to remind us that this is the most important historical lessons of the 20th century we must learn. If biopolitics refers to the life of the human species in its totality and reduces it to the most rudimentary survival drive, I think the Jiucai is both a reflection of this, and also it has the ability to counter it by claiming one's individual's life back. And this awareness might lead it to closer to true emancipations. As Esposito writes, the only way for life to defer death isn't to preserve it as such, but rather to be reborn continually in different guises. This is exactly what the chives do. The life power of Jiucai could be appropriated by the dominant regime, but we could also become a mighty, resilient force if it could gain intersubjective awareness through its continual becoming. On this note, I remain hopeful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, so just a note to the audience. So if you have a question for Professor Peng, please submit it through the Q&A. But first, I think Professor David Wong and we have some questions for you. First, do you want to start?
Sure. Thank you so much, Laikwan, for a wonderful paper. I had the honor actually to have read the article. So I was really amazed by your observation, your erudition, and of course, a very polemical argument you made throughout the paper. But here, let me just make first one observation and then I'll raise one question. First, I thought beyond this dimension of biopolitics, probably in light of this jiucai, the garlic chives image, actually versus the image, the sickle, that image, the metaphor. I wondered, if you could actually develop a kind of an ecological dimension of your critique. I thought probably just takes one step for you to pursue something even more politically suggestive when you get to this very intriguing contrast between 韭菜, our garlic chives on the one hand, and the sickle on the other, which you actually downplayed in your presentation. And of course, we are all aware of the political symbolism implied in this I don't know what to say, this tool of governance or control, whatever. Okay, but anyway, my question actually has to do with the last part of your presentation, which has to do with political self-consciousness on the one hand, and of course, your aspiration for some kind of agency. I wanted to find out more about the nuances implied in your survey of the forms of agency, as you have identified either in your research or in your article. Because if we go back to the metaphor of the garlic chives, I probably would suggest that there are different species of garlic chives, and there are different kinds of political agency and a political consciousness. And of course, today in your presentation, we saw the kind of a very grotesque kind of a parody or some kind of caricature of the power, either financial power of or a political power in charge of the nation and the state. I wonder if there are any other forms of agency you could introduce in terms of this kind of rampant vitality, this kind of energy, as you seems to be indicating in your invocation of this metaphor of 韭菜, garlic chives. And I do see this there's a powerful potential in your invocation of the ecological dimension of your symbolism. So I think all that's very, very promising, and I just want to learn more from you. Thank you.
Thanks, David. You're asking me these impossible questions. I don't know how to answer. In terms of agency, that's exactly what I want to explore, but the term I didn't use just because I don't think this term really can be most useful in describing the current Chinese situations. Because on the one hand, we do see a very homogeneous kind of like unified voice from China about a lot of things happening in the world, like how China happens to be a better place than many other places in terms of handling the pandemic and handling a lot of such things, while other parts of the world are in a mess. And so in that sense, they're right. I mean, in certain ways, right? We do know that the pandemic is largely contained in China through their own means. So these are powerful voices we cannot ignore. I mean, we cannot just simply say that they are brainwashed or whatever. I mean, these represents actual people's mentality and their observations to a certain extent, even though they're manipulated to the state propaganda machines, but at the same time, they also reflect certain real sentiments. But at the same time, it's precisely due to this kind of unified voice, which is like one single voice representing 1.4 billion people, that makes it very skeptical. How much, so to speak, the majority can be conceptualized. So in a way, no one in the whole world, I think, including the people in Zhongnanhai, really know what the people are thinking, because for example, Jie has also been working on the socialist period, and David, I'm sure you know that. One of the major problems of the Great Leap Forward is precisely the fact that the regime itself is duped by its own propaganda. The regime is so successful in, containing the peoples and giving only one voice to the people, to the extent that they themselves thought that the people really think like what they want them to think. So in that sense, we really do not know from any perspective who the Chinese people are, how many different voices they have, how do they actually see things? Because I'm sure there are 1.4 billion people in China, and each one of them have different ways of responding. But at the same time, they only represent oneself or one circles. So anytime we see people saying, oh, I think the Chinese people are actually thinking this way, we cannot but be doubtful. So in that sense, I really don't know how to conceptualize agency at this point. If we are thinking about agency as a collective, has some kind of collective dimension. Not that there isn't there, it's just that it's not accessible to us at this moment under this kind of national environment and political environment. So to what extent we can actually conceptualize a more kind of bigger emancipation project, I don't know. I can only say that history will tell. I mean, history will move in its own way, and how that is going to evolve probably at this moment is inaccessible to us, but it doesn't mean that it won't be revealing itself. So I guess I don't know whether this is a satisfying answer. If we related to ecological critique, yes, that's another problem here. Jiucai, as I mentioned, is actually a pretty obnoxious plant. We know that when we plant jiucai in one place, it will just invade everywhere. So jiucai is actually, it's very nutritious, but also ecologically very problematic. So to what extent that is also, jiucai can also pose a challenge to the kind of biodiversity that we should expect. The earth needs right now more than anything else. I would say that the earth doesn't need jiucai at all. If we can put it in such a direct way. But to what extent that we can turn it into something productive, it's also up to us to practice. I'm not a farmer, and I hope that somebody in the audience can give us some hints about how to make jiucai a environmentally friendly plant. But it's unfortunate that we are stuck in a situation, particularly in any association with the Chinese people. That's also something I feel very uncomfortable with. So to what extent that jiucai can represent the Chinese people, I think I feel guilty for writing this, because this is exactly what I don't want it to be. I don't want to have a particular symbol or metaphor to represent the Chinese people. So in that sense, I'm also struggling how to present the dilemma. On the one hand, we want to know what the Chinese people are thinking, but at the same time, we also don't, because we don't want to structuralize it. Am I answering your questions? I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. Before, there are a couple of questions coming in the Q&A, but if I may, I'm really curious about this. I actually find that this is a metaphor, or like jiucai as a metaphor. It really captures a really complex issues, and thank you for unpacking a lot of that for us. And as you know, I'm very interested in the socialist period, and as you're talking about jiucai as this nauseous plant, I can't help but think about ducao, or the poisonous weed, and then the sickle is cutting the poisonous weed, of course, in the throughout the 1950s to the 1970s. And I also was wondering, sort of, what is then the legacy of revolution, from revolution to involution? Or are we, and then is the sickle still referring to the party? And because there are a lot of the internet memes that you pointed us to, for example, the self-cultivation of the jiucai is a reference probably to Liu Shaoqi's How to Be the self-cultivation of a communist. I kept on wondering, then how did people refer to themselves in earlier time periods? I mean, a plant metaphor more like from Tokugawa Japan would be like the sesame. This, I think a Bakufu official actually said that the peasants are like sesame. The more you press them, the more you get out of them. So this idea of extraction of the peasant from the government, it's oftentimes the government making that comparison. In the Mao era, I guess people are sunflowers, or they refer to themselves as sunflowers who are looking up to the sun. I think the only kind of actually creature that is has the same kind of complexity as garlic chive is actually the sparrow. I've been really interested in the sparrow, but Mao referred to the sparrow as this little creature that can grow infinitely through sparrow warfare, because sparrow warfare is almost like a synonym for guerrilla warfare. And so in 1945, he said, how did we grow our prowess with sparrow warfare? Sparrows fly wherever they can find food. The sparrows in the sky were our seeds that grew many sprouts. And with those seeds, we grew the party, the regime, the base areas, the people, the food and training for cadres. And even though sparrows are opportunists that follow food, they're small, but you add them up, they amount to a lot. And then he says that our sparrow is going to grow up into the big pong bird, into an eagle. But then later, of course, he called for the extermination of sparrows. And so obviously he compares the peasant to the sparrow, but then also doesn't care so much about the killing of the peasants in the Great Leap around the same period. So I think this is the only kind of a parallel. But the overall question is more, what is the relationship then between the current biopolitical subject and the earlier regimes or earlier, say, the Maoist biopolitical subject, if there is such a thing? How would you connect them?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, thanks for this reminder. Now that you mentioned the sparrows, you're totally right that there's such an interesting comparative link between the two metaphors. Although, in a way, they are both strong. Both the sparrows and the chives are very strong. It has a very strong productivity. Again, if we go back to Foucault, he's talking precisely about this kind of celebration or the promotion of the life, prospering, flourishing. So in that sense, the sparrows and the chives are both very vivid metaphor for a biopolitical subject, if we use Foucault's analysis. But at the same time, as I said, the biopolitics is so much connected to thanatopolitics. So again, the spiral also sort of like revealed that dimension that at one point Mao celebrated, and at the other point he asked the Chinese people to exterminate it. So if it's growing to a certain force that come back to the extent that you can no longer use it, but threaten the power and celebrate it, has to be, taken away. So the life and death are always connected in both, particularly in Agamemnon's analysis, So I do think that the sparrows could also be understood as a biopolitical subject, particularly a state engineering biopolitical subject. Jiucai is slightly interesting because it's a folk kind of metaphor. It's not a state production. It's a self-irony. It has a lot of self-reflection. And it is one of the most, I think, those who are from China would know that this is one of the most popular and widely recognized code word, if we want to use that term, in the Chinese internet, among many. So Jiucai also itself has a dissident kind of dimension, although that dissidents are also complying with certain mechanisms of the state. So it has a different dimension or additional dimension of self-mockery, which is, which is very complex to me. As David mentioned, that the sickle is a bit too, obvious, referring to the power, representing the power, the political power. So to what extent the sickles, the jiucai, and represents a certain upper level or metamorphosis of the spiral? I don't know, but that would be interesting thing to think about. But thanks for referring this.
Oh, thank you. I think we have shall we go to the Q&A? There are a few really interesting questions from the Q&A, and maybe I will just read the question. So the first question is from Shaoling Ma, who will be giving a talk in our series in 3 weeks. Thank you for a great paper, Professor Pang. I learned a lot. I'm curious whether jiucai emerges in discourses about rural revitalization policies, agriculture reforms, and their related internet and e-commerce developments like rural media or 自媒体.
Wow. Okay, that might be that connection, which I am not yet aware of. But I think that jiucai is definitely a referral of the individual subject. It's a as I said, a self kind of reference, in an ironic and satirical way. But to what extent they really treat the jiucai as a plant that actually can grow in a rural area and that can be, becoming a way of developing the rural economy, I don't think so yet. I guess it's not there that prominent because it's used in a displaced way, a transformed way, as a metonymy. So to what extent that it might be related to rural revitalizations, I would love to hear Professor Ma's comments. I don't know much about it. Yeah.
David, do you want to sort of moderate, or I can continue doing it? Okay. Another question is, what is intersubjective awareness? I think this was in the last slide. And what does it mean that we all survive just like chives?
And I think, thank you for giving me this opportunity to explain the intersubjective awareness here, because I think garlic chives is also as a metaphor, it also represents a very individualized atomic, like a very individualized existence. Jiucai, you can say, has no awareness of what's going on. The only thing jiucai knows is to grow. That's all about jiucai. We know the way that people understand jiucai in China is precisely it grows so fast. You cut it and it continues to grow, cut it and continue to grow, and then it just invades the entire place with such a strong life power. So in that sense, I think what we might want to think about is how the jiucai can stop just growing, just stop vertically going on, but to become more aware of other jiucai also caught in the same situations, caught in a certain blind drive. That's the reason why I think that in the beginning of the paper that it's most important is to reconfigure that drive. How this life power can no longer be appropriated by the economic sovereignty in terms of using it as an engine for economic growth, but to start investing the political dimension of it. In order to come to terms with political subjects, the intersubjectivity is extremely important, because without an awareness of other existing subjects or agencies or citizens or whoever you want to claim it, a political community cannot be formed. A political consciousness cannot be formed. You cannot just form your own political consciousness. You have to do it with a group of people. So this is the idea that I was hoping to suggest, is how the Jucai do not just think of itself, its own existence, but others' existence, and try to rethink about the possibility of the public. Well, the Jucai itself is a very private metaphor at this moment, I think. So, but I do think that there is these dimensions the Jucai metaphor actually implies. So that's what I mean by intersubjective awareness. What does mean we all survive like chives? And I, in a way, I think a lot of the people in China, particularly younger people, do be constantly calling themselves Jucai. They are always calling themselves, however much they accept the political kind of ideology, but they still call themselves Jucai because it is very private. I mean, it's like it's their own survival experiences. They feel like they are being so good. So to that extent, that a lot of people, not just in China, but around the world, have this sense of living like a Jucai. But again, how do we transform that isolated experience or sentiments into a public consciousness is something we could further think about.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so in many ways, how can some Jiucai become aware of other Jiucai also as different beings, right?
Yes.
We have a number of questions now, so I want to get to a question by Hongru Xiong. Many thanks for your great talk. I am an Asia Fellow in Ash Center at the Harvard Kennedy School. My question is about the mass entrepreneurship mentioned. How do you evaluate the social effects of stimulating mass entrepreneurship in recent years? Is it a solution to address the inclusion problem in China?
That's precisely, that's a very important question because it relates to how much China is in a neoliberal kind of society, or how much neoliberalism is the driving ideology of China. The whole idea of entrepreneurship is core to neoliberalism. We all know that. Each of us have to become an entrepreneur to become a capitalist machines, and then again, it's going back to the private economic drive and forget about the other, public participation, so on and so forth. So this mass entrepreneurship has both dimensions, right? Entrepreneurs tends to be individualized, as defined as individuals, but mass as this, collective mass, kind of like a big number of them together. So it's both individual, but also, invested with the social idea of the mass and the people, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, I do think that the mass entrepreneurship is a neoliberal kind of strategy, and it's meant to, again, neoliberalism solved a lot of economic problems, but also created a lot more. So in that sense, I do think that mass entrepreneurship is extremely problematic in the current Chinese situations. At the same time, entrepreneurship itself, I'm going back to neoliberalism kind of like discussions. I think this ideology or this economic kind of like policy are also being challenged by the state itself. I think the current Chinese government are also not breaking this kind of development, applying a brake to make sure that China is going in that direction, because they also see a lot of problems developing, particularly in terms of the political crisis, that it might at the end one day kind of invite. So is there a solution to address the inclusion problem? It's both a solution and itself a problem. So.
Thank you. The next question is from a graduate student, Shavan Zhang, thank you so much for your talk, Professor Pang. I'm wondering how you see the role of contemporary media cultures and platforms in shaping the discourse around these trenchant socio-political issues, especially given the socialist legacy of media forms and its strong metaphorical tie to the poisonous weed.
I don't know yet, because I think we are very aware that in the last couple of months, particularly, the media censorship has become much more. I mean, it has been always here, but then after in the last 2 months, it's even getting more fierce. So, to what extent the media can have any effect, political effect? Probably not in this environment, because the state is very, very strong in controlling it. But we do see glimpses of such, creativity burst, just like what I showed you. The 之后浪 is not just the 之后浪. In fact, there were many of such videos. One is 是飞浪 is the African waves. There's a video showing this mimicking, being ironic to the Bell initiatives that all the young people are sent to Africa, and there's also 九浪, the waves of 韭菜. So there are a lot of these coming up, but it comes up and then being censored, comes up and being cut down, just in a way very much like the 韭菜 itself. The sickles is very active in cutting down this kind of like folk creativity. So there are a lot of them. If you remember, TikTok is originally a Chinese invention, apparently. But at the same time, this kind of like folk energy and folk creativity can also be extremely dangerous for the political regime. So to that extent that we have to see the kind of tug of war, how is it going to end up?
Our last question here is from another graduate student. Hi, Peng. Thank you so much for such an informative and entertaining talk. I'm wondering, given how ephemeral and fast updating today's media texts are, how much of the parodies is media entrepreneurship in the attention economy, and how much of it is articulation of political consciousness? Are those parody artists not reaping attention dividends and profits from those who watch them?
Of course. But where does the attention come from? The attention itself has political meanings. Otherwise, like you remember that the 韭菜, the B 站, the Bilibili video. Obviously, that women do not have any intentions of providing a parody, a political parody, but the netizens themselves gave him meanings. So these attentions precisely came from the netizens and the ordinary people. So how do we see this kind of attentions being simply economic, or it actually also implies a lot of political meanings? Like both, right? So to what extent we need to negotiate them, and how they might end up moving one direction or the other, it's hard to say. But I don't think that we need to condemn anything asking for attention itself, because attention means a lot. It means people. It means the collective attentions. That might not be bad.
I mean, I'm somehow reminded of just how vibrantly there's a lot of expression. Even I think every sort of propaganda text you show us produce so many other parodies of it that actually show alternative forms of thinking than what. So it's not as if the mainstream main melody discourse is completely sort of brainwashing or in any way sort of taking over, but rather there's or even the Bilibili, it's quite interesting how the comments on each that is also a display of mass creativity, but I do wonder also about the political energy, whether that will translate itself into any or it
Exactly.
is kind of an outlet of frustration for the most part.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. I mean, there's no reason to invest too much, meanings to that politically and saying that this is going to become a major political force. I don't think so. But what we can only say is that however powerful the state apparatus is, the people can still find ways to voice themselves. Like the 之后浪, I mean, the second video that I showed you, I don't know whether you were able to see that. I think it's somewhere in the end, I mean, in the middle, the narrator used a lot of the people who produced the video use a lot of clips from Stephen Chang's film, The King of Comedy. He uses a lot, or he or she uses a lot of the clips from that one film. So it's very interesting because the film itself is a black comedy, and it actually shows how an ordinary, very serious actor who really wanted to become a major, to develop a major acting career, can only work as an extra. So it's a very dark comedy, but at the same time, it also shows how this video producers are aware of a lot of using different kinds of cultural resources to help articulate his or her point. So in that sense, I'm very optimistic in the sense that these people are aware of what's going on. And so, for example, in China, for example, there's like it looks like there's a major consensus related to Hong Kong. But at the same time, when we see Hong Kong being represented in such a nuanced way, we also realize that it might not be entirely the way that the state apparatus depicts. So those are major questions what we have to see. Again, you're right. No one should invest too much aspirations in this kind of like playfulness.
If you would, there's another last question that came in from another graduate student, Will Julian. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I found the connection between 韭菜 as perennial and persistent plant and 韭菜 as plastic and politically charged meme especially poignant in the explosion of 弹幕 or user-generated comments across the screen as an unwitting gardener of the former was instantly transformed into an unwitting medium of the latter. I wonder if you can comment on the sociality of 弹幕 user-generated subtitles and whether you see them as having a unique resilience or productive power.
弹幕, I know. I mean, I think the Bilibili is another, very interesting platform that really helps, because the Bilibili is a platform where everybody can upload their materials and everybody can comment on the materials. So there is still a quasi-democratic idea attached to it, or where internet should actually be invested with. So in that sense, I agree with you that the fact that this ordinary clip is being converted into a political expression itself is very interesting. So whether we can see that 弹幕 has a particular unique resistance, yes, I agree, because it does shows, because we know that the 弹幕 has this synchronized kind of like relations between the comments and the video. So when we are, and then the comments accumulate to an extent that many different comments can appear together. So at the same time, it is you can say a representation of democratic voices and contestations going on. But with the kind of censorships going on, and a lot of people are very aware of of the limitations. So I don't know how it's going to grow to become. I come from Hong Kong, so I am very sentimental about resistance, and in a way also very pessimistic about it. So if you ask me whether I have any hope, I do. Probably not.
So David,
Yeah, could I ask one follow-up question? I think one thing you didn't quite cover in today's presentation, but you did develop in your article, is the very menacing possibility of the mutual implication between garlic chives and the sickle. In other words, that means that garlic chives are not just always self-contented garlic chives. Sometimes they may end up becoming a different layer of social interaction, a kind of a form of a sickle. Jack Ma. Jack Ma seems to be a sickle to the investors or potential investors of ants. But in another round of a sort of battle between the government and the enterprise, Jack Ma turned out to be one of the garlic chives, right? Mm-hmm. So, would you comment upon this? I really feel very intrigued by this. This is a kind of an evolution, I guess.
Yeah. That's exactly the tragedy of this, because it's like it's also another way of saying how the traditional kind of like power relationship, there's the oppressor and the oppressed, there's the capitalist and there's the proletarian kind of analogy don't work, precisely because the proletarian wants to become the capitalist, right? And the capitalist can become a proletarian in any given day. And this is the unique Chinese situations that we have to face. To an extent that I do think there's a lot of insecurity in among many people, particularly those who are sickles, who have been sickles, because they know that one day they can become a garlic chive very, very easily in this kind of environment. So we have to be aware that in such a power intensive kind of environment and situations as contemporary China, power moves very quickly. Those who own power and those who are deprived can quickly turn around. And who is in control? I don't know. Some people might think that they are in control, but seeing this kind of circulations, rapid circulation, just like what we saw in Cultural Revolution, for example. Once we allow this kind of intensive power to circulate, the power would go anywhere and come back to those who think who are in control anytime. So I totally agree with you. Your reminder is very important. Thanks for that.
And thank you. And that your last comment also answered the question about the revolutionary legacy and similarities to the, I think our time is more or less up, and thank you for sharing with us this wonderful paper, and thank you everyone for the thoughtful questions and for tuning in. So hope you will tune in again in 3 weeks' time for Professor Xiaoling Ma's talk. And so thanks. Good night.